The US-Canada economic relationship, often hailed as a model of friendly trade, is once again under strain, this time over softwood lumber. The US Commerce Department has sharply increased import duties on Canadian lumber, reigniting a decades-old dispute. This isn't just a technical trade tweak, it's a move with real consequences for anyone building, buying, or selling a home. The tariff hike marks a new, more aggressive phase in a saga that pits American producers against Canadian exporters over fairness and market access. It's not just about wood, it's about the broader, increasingly contentious trade environment between the two neighbors. Both countries are facing housing affordability crises, and lumber is at the heart of the issue. The new tariffs land at the intersection of international trade and the domestic struggle for affordable housing. Can the US protect its lumber industry without worsening its own housing crisis? The answer is far from clear. Canadian officials condemn the move as protectionist, while US homebuilders warn it will only drive up construction costs. From the forests of British Columbia to the suburbs of Texas, the impact of this timber tussle will be deeply felt. To grasp the stakes, consider the role of softwood lumber in North American life. Harvested from coniferous trees like pine and spruce, softwood lumber is the backbone of residential construction, framing, flooring, roofing, and more. Its affordability and versatility make it indispensable for new homes, renovations, and countless other uses. The US consumes vast amounts of lumber, but domestic mills can't meet demand. About 30% of US lumber is imported, and 80 to 90% of that comes from Canada. This deep reliance creates a symbiotic but fragile relationship. US builders need Canadian wood to keep projects moving. Canadian forestry depends on the American market. Any disruption, like a tariff, hits the entire housing supply chain, not just a niche product. The markets are so integrated that replacing Canadian lumber or ramping up US production quickly isn't feasible. When tariffs hit, the shockwaves travel from importers to builders to families hoping to buy their first home. On July 26, 2025, the US Commerce Department set a new combined duty rate for most Canadian softwood lumber at 20.56%. Up from 14.54% and more than double the rate from a year earlier. The new duties are retroactive to January 2023, leaving Canadian producers with massive, unexpected bills. For smaller mills, this could be financially devastating. The BC Lumber Trade Council warns that pending reviews could push the total rate even higher, possibly above 30%. At that level, tariffs could add tens of thousands to the cost of building a new home. This aggressive tariff strategy is part of a broader America First trade agenda, using tariffs to protect domestic industries, even if it raises costs for US consumers. Earlier threats of a 25% blanket tariff on Canadian goods still loom, keeping the trade relationship unstable. Instability is now the new normal for North American lumber. At the heart of the dispute is a clash over how Canada manages its forests. US producers argue that Canadian lumber benefits from unfair government subsidies. In the US, most timber is harvested from private land at market prices. In Canada, about 90% comes from publicly owned, Crown land, with government-set stumpage fees. Americans claim these fees are artificially low, giving Canadian producers an edge. Countervailing duties are meant to offset this alleged subsidy, raising Canadian lumber prices to fair market levels. The recent hike to 20.56% reflects the US view that Canadian subsidization has increased. Canada rejects this, arguing its system is different, not unfair, and that its fees are responsive to market conditions. Canadian producers also face costs Americans don't, like mandatory reforestation. Canada has challenged US duties at the WTO and under trade agreements, often winning, but the US rarely budges. This unresolved disagreement over stumpage fees is the knot at the center of the dispute. Until it's untangled, the conflict will persist. Tariffs on softwood lumber ripple through the economy, ultimately landing on home buyers. The National Association of Homebuilders estimates the latest hike could add $15,000, $20,000 to the price of a typical new US home. Every step of the supply chain, from importer to distributor to builder, passes on the increased cost. For many buyers, this price jump means being locked out of homeownership. In Canada, reduced access to the US market could force sawmills to cut production, leading to job losses and, ironically, higher prices at home in the long run. A weakened forestry sector hurts the broader Canadian economy. Tariffs also drive up prices for all wood-based products, from renovations to furniture. As new construction costs rise, so do prices for existing homes, tightening the housing market. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce warns that continued tariffs could add $14,000 to U.S. home costs by 2027. This isn't just an industry headache, it's a direct threat to housing affordability for millions. Canadian leaders have responded to the tariff hike with alarm, calling it an existential threat to their forestry sector and housing goals. Ontario officials warn that escalating tariffs could trigger a housing disaster, undermining plans to build 1.5 million new homes by 2031. If U.S. construction slows, demand for Canadian wood plummets, sending shockwaves through Canada's economy. British Columbia, the heart of Canada's lumber industry, is especially vulnerable. BC's forest minister calls the 20.56% tariff a gut punch to an industry already struggling with job losses and market volatility. The retroactive duties are particularly painful for small and medium-sized producers who may not have the cash reserves to pay unexpected bills. Many face the prospect of taking out massive loans or risking bankruptcy. The very policy meant to protect U.S. mills could end up sabotaging Canada's ability to house its own citizens. The risk of widespread mill closures and job losses is real and growing. The human cost of the lumber dispute is measured in lost jobs and struggling communities. In British Columbia alone, over 40,000 forestry jobs have vanished since the 1990s. The new tariffs threaten to accelerate this decline, pushing thousands more out of work. Small, family-owned mills are especially vulnerable. Many may be forced to close or sell to larger competitors. Each layoff is a family facing an uncertain future in a town with few other options. Industry groups are pleading for provincial support, streamlined regulations, faster permits, but these measures can only do so much. Ultimately, the fate of thousands of workers now rests on high-stakes political negotiations. The outcome will shape the future of entire communities. While tariffs aim to help U.S. lumber producers, they're a major headache for American home builders. The National Association of Home Builders calls the duties a tax on home buyers, with 60% of builders reporting significant price hikes due to tariffs. The problem is worst in high-growth states like Texas, Florida, and California, where demand for new housing is highest. Builders face a tough choice: absorb higher costs or pass them on to buyers, risking affordability. When construction slows, the economic ripple effects are felt across manufacturing, transportation, and retail. The White House claims tariffs won't raise consumer costs, but builders on the ground see the opposite. A looming national security investigation could lead to even harsher measures like quotas on Canadian lumber. For U.S. builders, this could mean not just higher prices, but actual shortages, stalling projects, and worsening the housing crisis. The stakes for American families couldn't be higher. The U.S. and Canada now stand at a crossroads. Continued escalation, more tariffs or quotas, could trigger a broader trade war, hurting consumers and businesses on both sides. Canada is fighting back through legal channels and pushing for a new softwood lumber agreement. Behind the scenes, there's talk of a managed trade solution, possibly quotas in exchange for removing tariffs. The ideal outcome is a long-term agreement, providing stability for both industries. But deep divisions over stumpage fees make negotiations tough. Without compromise, the economic damage will keep mounting: higher housing costs, lost jobs, and a fraying partnership between two close allies. A resolution would require political will and recognition of the integrated North American economy. The choice is stark continued conflict and instability, or a return to cooperation and affordable housing. The clock is ticking for both nations.